Nadal tossed the ball into the Paris light and the stadium inhaled as one. Court Philippe Chatrier had that particular hush before impact, a hush that makes you aware of your own breathing. My phone vibrated against my palm. One line, then another. Pathetic employees like you don't deserve success. A beat. You're fired. Clear out your desk by Monday. I read them twice, as if a second look could change the shape of the words. It didn't. The serve cracked. The crowd erupted and fell around me like rain I couldn't feel. I was 38, courtside at Roland-Garros, meant to be on a small, hard-won holiday after a long season of flights and conference rooms. Instead, I was ending a 6-year chapter of my life in the time it takes a champion to land a forehand. My name is Eric Mercer. Until a minute ago, I was Senior Strategic Director at Atheron Group, Chicago. I had moved through Europe like the cautious guest who learned the language before knocking, German first, then French, then the grammar of boardrooms where tea was offered before terms. 6 years of clients who sent photos of their children and invited me to small kitchens after long meetings. 6 years of dinners missed at home, of apologies to Amelia that felt too brief for what they replaced. And now, a dismissal by text, written with the confidence of someone certain I would not fight back. I let the screen go black. Around me, flags shivered, camera shutters clattered like hail. The man to my right wore a dark suit that understood elegance and a watch that didn't need to brag. He'd smiled at the line judges earlier. Unhurried, self-contained. I had seen his face flash on conference slides in Amsterdam 2 years ago. Sir Alistair Munro, Solstice Ventures, competitor, quiet storm. Everything all right? He asked, voice low, British consonants taking their time. Just work, I said, and the lie sat there, thin as a paper cup in the rain. He didn't press. He didn't need to. Executives like him read posture the way analysts read spreadsheets. He had already noticed the stillness that follows a blow. Nadal took the game. People stood. They applauded something historic. I clapped too, palms meeting out of habit, but my head was elsewhere on a small office in Chicago, a man named Victor Lang who loved credit more than truth, and a nephew with an empty passport and a full title. Shame arrived first, hot and unsteady. Then, unexpectedly, something cooler. A line of thought that aligned, like the strings on a racket. If a career can be ended by a text, perhaps it was already ending. If a door can slam this loudly, perhaps there is a corridor behind it. I looked again at the man beside me. The timing was a coincidence on paper, but in business, timing is a language. I had a message on my phone and a listener within arm's reach. A champion lifted a trophy. I felt something else lift inside me. Not anger, not yet. Intention. 6 years is a long time to hold your breath. When Atheron hired me, Europe was a slide with a dotted arrow and 3 bullet points. Opportunity size, regulatory hurdles, aspirational timeline, no office, no local partners, no sense of how many coffees it takes for a German CIO to move from polite to trusting. I started with a carry-on and a notebook, where I kept phrases. I didn't want to forget idioms, the names of children and dogs, who took espresso and who preferred mint tea after lunch. Language first, German because diligence likes precision, French because nuance can be a signature. The vocabulary of trains and weather and gratitude before the vocabulary of scope and price. I missed a lot of dinners. Amelia learned the shortcut ways to say goodnight across time zones. A choreography of small rituals. Send a photo of the cat in the window. Ask me what the Rhine looked like at sunset. Remind me to sleep before I tried to solve the unsolvable. You tell yourself it is temporary. You tell yourself you are building something sturdy enough to come home to. And then months become a stride, and the stride becomes your life. The work moved slowly until it didn't. One introduction at a trade fair in Frankfurt becomes 3 site visits. One pilot in Lyon becomes a reference story that lives longer than the slideshow. In 6 years, I signed 43 major clients, each with its own climate. Manufacturing in Baden-Württemberg, where every uptime minute was a quiet oath, a Paris fintech that wanted elegance in its data flows, a Danish retailer that measured success in fewer emails after rollout. The revenue tallied itself in a line on a board, report 37% of Atheron's total by year 6, but success didn't feel like numbers. It felt like being asked back. It felt like someone switching to your language before you switched to theirs. Victor Lang loved the numbers when they sang for him. In meetings, he would pull my work close the way a presenter pulls a spotlight, then step forward as if the light were his. He promised equity the way a host promises dessert later, when you've proven just a little more. When a big proposal went sideways in the early years, he made my cultural blind spots a lesson for the room. When I won the same client back with a revised model and quiet apologies, he called it leadership alignment. The math added. The grammar shifted. You learn, in Europe especially, that time is a form of respect, that you don't rush a Swiss procurement team through a decision any more than you rush a Bordeaux vineyard through a season. Trust accrues like interest, slowly, then all at once. The surprise was not that I succeeded. It was how often success coincided with restraint, leaving a pause untouched, allowing a concern to be named by the client, not by me. By year 6, the map had turned from dotted arrows to cities with names that warmed my throat. Munich, Lille, Oslo, Ghent. I believed, perhaps naively, that Atheron would honor what I had built, because honoring it was rational. But envy speaks a faster language than patience. Victor's smile got brighter as my chair moved a little farther from the center of the table. And the equity? Always almost. Always after the next quarter. I told myself to wait. I mistook quiet for safety. The first warning sign was small enough to ignore. A leadership sync I'd always attended moved to a tight agenda format. Calendar, invite vanished. Minutes never arrived. Victor said it was operational pruning, a phrase that sounds tidy until you realize you're the branch. Then came the calls that hopped over me like flat stones. Clients I'd shepherded for years, suddenly routed to Victor, then to his nephew, Cole, whose passport was as clean as a showroom floor. I told myself it was temporary, a rebalancing after an aggressive quarter. Optimism is a useful tool until it turns into a blindfold. Cole arrived with a resume that read like a wish: MBA, leadership, internship, global outlook. No languages, no scar tissue from failed pilots, or the midnight panic of a data migration. He smiled with the certainty of someone who has never had to rebuild trust in a second language. "Eric," he said, "I'll shadow you a couple of weeks, then take the reins for Europe so you can focus on strategy." He meant well, the way a storm means to water the fields. Damage isn't always personal, it's often ignorant. At home, Amelia watched me measure my words. She has a talent for reading what silence is doing to a person. "This isn't pruning," she said, folding laundry into precise rectangles as if order could be willed into the rest of our life. "It's staging. Men who bring family into the room are arranging the furniture for a reveal." I laughed it off, then checked my phone in the middle of the night to make sure the accounts I loved were still mine to protect. The Paris trip should have tasted like reward. Victor handed me the envelope in front of the team: Roland-Garros, corporate hospitality, the little speech about recognition. People clapped. I thought about the years it had taken to pronounce Philippe Chatrier the way locals do, the coffees with procurement heads who spoke softly until they didn't. I wanted to believe in the ceremony of gratitude, the way companies enact thanks to remind themselves they can still feel it. Then the access changed. I noticed a forwarding rule on a shared mailbox that didn't exist before. Clients mentioned they'd been told I was scaling back. A weekly report carried my work under Cole's byline, a formatting error that wasn't. I confronted Victor lightly, just enough pressure to test the structure. He smiled, called it streamlining, and said I shouldn't worry about matters above my pay grade. Language again, doing the slow violence of reclassification. On the flight to Paris, I watched cloud tops turn into empty continents. I thought about loyalty as a two-way bridge and realized I'd been maintaining it from one side. In Europe, I learned early that power without relationship is brittle. In Chicago, I was remembering that ambition without gratitude decays from the middle out. When the text finally came courtside, it felt less like a surprise and more like the moment a hairline crack admits to being a fault. The trip wasn't a thank you, it was distance disguised as prize, space for a transfer of keys, a polite corridor through which a career could be wheeled out without blocking the hallway. I put the phone away and felt the strange calm that arrives after a verdict. If they had mistaken my patience for passivity, they would soon learn the difference. When the ceremony ended, the stands loosened into chatter and footsteps, the way a sea unfastens itself from shore. Sir Alistair rose, smoothing his jacket with a gesture both practical and ceremonial. He glanced at me, then at the court, where ball kids gathered petals of clay into tidy lines. "Forgive me," he said softly, "but you look like a man whose day has taken a turn." I could have pretended a little longer, but pretense is wasted on people who live by reading air currents. I unlocked my phone and tilted the screen. 2 messages, brief, unkind, efficient. He read them once, then again, as if listening for an echo that would confirm he had heard correctly. He said. Not outrage, not pity. A measured syllable, like a chess player touching a piece before the move. Walk? He was expeded. We joined the river of spectators, past the posters of past champions, out into a Paris afternoon that smelled faintly of rain on copper. Taxis idled, scooters parted the traffic like muscled fish. We spoke first of tennis because, to begin with, the wound is to miss the body it sits in. Nadal's weight transfer, the elegance of a point constructed patiently rather than seized. People forget, Alistair said, that pressure rewards those who breathe well. Near the Louvre, he led me into a restaurant with white tablecloths that remembered every iron, where waiters sailed rather than walked. No preamble, no performance of sympathy. A small table by the window. He ordered in French, with the ease of an old friend. 1 roast chicken to share, a chablis that knew when to stop speaking. When the waiter left, he placed my phone between us like an extra glass. "You've built Atheron's European spine," he said. "I've watched it from a respectful distance, sometimes from a resentful one." A dry smile. "Your name occurs in rooms where caution lives. Names don't protect you from texts," I said. "No," he agreed, "but relationships do. And by the sound of it, your former employer has just made a profound relationship error." He paused, then let the idea arrive fully. "We've spent 3 years building the bones for an American expansion at Solstice. Infrastructure first, brand second, my team's stubborn religion. We lack one thing, someone who understands how to translate without losing meaning on either side of the Atlantic." I said nothing for a moment. The chicken arrived, and the waiter spooned a little jus as if blessing the middle of the table. I thought of Amelia, of our apartment that still smelled of miles flown. I thought of clients who texted photos from their children's recitals, and of Victor, who mistook influence for ownership. "What would you need?" I asked. "Autonomy," he said. "Clear runway. A direct line to me when needed and silence when that's better. 30% above your current salary unless your HR packet hides a miracle and equity that actually vests. You would lead our American build while maintaining the European relationships that trust you more than your former logo." It wasn't a rescue. It was an exchange of air in the lungs, a different kind of breathing. "I have a non-compete," I said. "Chicago bounded, if memory serves." "London is not Chicago," he replied, the corner of his mouth conceding a private joke. "We will let counsel be strict so you can be generous." Outside, the pyramid caught the last light and made it patient. I looked at my phone still on the table, still ruthless, and felt the axis tilt. Not revenge, not yet. Alignment. "Dinner," I said, "was an excellent idea." "Good," he answered. "Tomorrow we talk terms." We ate. We did not rush. Pressure rewards those who breathe well. Chicago met me with a sky the color of unsharpened graphite. Monday had that winter edge that slips under a coat and checks whether you still want to be here. I did, but not for long. I walked into Atheron's lobby with a traveler's bag and a stillness I'd decided to keep. The receptionist lifted her eyes, then her shoulders, a sympathy shrug she couldn't give words to. I took the elevator alone and watched my reflection behave itself in the steel. Victor had chosen the conference room with the glass wall, theater by design. Inside, Victor, at the head, smile pressed and shiny. Cole to his right, the good chair swallowing him like it had practice. And Patricia, from HR, neat stack of papers, aligned with a pen. "Eric," Victor said, as if addressing a dinner guest. "How was Paris?" "Educational," I said, sitting across from him. The table smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old decisions. Patricia slid the packet forward. Severance that added up, just barely. A non-compete that hugged the Chicago metro area like a tight ring. Return of property boilerplate. The simple verbs that end complicated years. Nothing generous, Victor offered, but nothing unusual either. We're restructuring Europe under Cole's leadership. You'll find the terms standard. Cole wore the grin of a man who has been handed keys to a car he hasn't learned to drive. "I'll take good care of your accounts," he said, like an oath recited for the first time. I thought of flights at dawn, of boardrooms that smelled like coffee and snow-wet wool, of the moment a cautious client lets their shoulders fall because they've decided to trust you. I thought of Alistair's calm voice and a draft contract that gave more than it asked. I had already spent Sunday with counsel confirming the line work. London is not Chicago. Solstice is not an Illinois entity. My non-compete, like so many cages, was smaller up close. I signed. No negotiation theater, no performance of outrage. The pen made its tidy tracks and I felt something unclasp behind my ribs. Victor blinked. He had rehearsed a different version of me. "I have to say," he managed, "I expected more resistance. This is refreshing." "No point fighting the inevitable," I said, standing. We shook hands. His felt dry as paper. "I wish you the best with Europe." The real conversation was in what I didn't take. No appeals to fairness, no hints about what I knew. Silence can be a courtesy and a strategy. I let it be both. At my desk, I packed slowly. A postcard from Oslo, a notebook where I tracked small things who liked rosemary bread, who preferred data plainly dressed. Cole hovered nearby, narrating plans to anyone within earshot. Pan-European alignment. Scalable synergies. Phrases that float until gravity shows up. I left the stapler, took the fountain pen Amelia gave me after my first German contract closed. Patricia caught my eye at the doorway. There was a question inside her look, and something like apology. I nodded. Another kind of breathing. On the street, the wind worked its way through the city. I felt oddly light. Loss had done its muttering. The work ahead had a clearer voice. Not revenge, not spectacle. Continuity moved where it would be honored. Tuesday began with the sound of my personal phone, the number only a handful of clients used when flights were delayed or decisions needed a midnight escort. "Eric," Klaus said, the mild German cadence of Christensen Global carrying fatigue. "I called your office, and a young man informed me he is now our primary contact. He could not pronounce our product line. He suggested we circle back on a deployment we completed last winter." He paused, polite even in frustration. "What is happening?" "There have been changes," I said. "I can't say much yet. I will not leave you untended." "Good," he replied softly, "because we do not buy software, we buy sleep." After we hung up, 3 more calls followed in a gentle collision. Marie from Hollowgate, direct, as always. "This nephew tells me to trust the process." "We trust people, Eric. If you are leaving Atheron, we must revisit the contract." A Danish COO, who had sent me a photo of his boat in summer, now spoke carefully about winterizing. A Norwegian project lead from Fjord Farm wrote a message so diplomatic it rang like a bell. We seek continuity above all. I did not sell. I did not hint. I listened, took notes, and said the one honest thing I could say. I will be in touch when I can speak freely. Silence works both ways. Sometimes it earns credit. By Thursday, Victor discovered what absence really sounds like. 6 voicemails, each more urgent than the last, arrived in a row. A kind of musical scale in panic. Eric, old boy, let's clear up a misunderstanding. Then, we may have been hasty. Then, Cole is acclimating. Your guidance would be invaluable. Then, finally, the unvarnished plea, pick up, please. He still didn't grasp the shape of what he'd broken. You can inherit contracts. You cannot inherit history. Cole, for his part, had launched himself into calls with the confidence of a man who thought charisma could outtalk context. He interrupted. He filled the quiet with words. He handled a potential client in Zurich the way an eager salesman handles a mirror, too much attention on the surface, not enough on the room. Friday morning, the letter from Novara Labs found its way to my inbox through a friend who loved a clean process more than a messy loyalty. Due to material changes in account management and the absence of agreed continuity, we request termination. $12 million asked to go home. I read the sentences twice, not because I doubted them, but because they were so calm. True anger rarely shouts. That evening, Victor came to my building. He looked as if he had been up late, arguing with spreadsheets. You're destroying this out of spite, he said, voice careful a moment before it might crack. I'm not destroying anything, I answered. I'm simply not available to save you from what you chose. What do you want? Money? Title? I want nothing from you, I said. You texted me during match point. That was your decision. This is the echo. He left the way people leave when they realize a door is not stuck. It is locked from the other side. I made tea, called Amelia, and told her my day in a few clean lines. We do this for each other, remove the noise, keep the truth. The night felt spacious. I slept without seeing airports. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of quiet that lets the smallest sounds announce themselves. The kettle's thin whistle, the radiator's soft tick. My phone lit with Patricia's name. She never called on weekends. Confidentially, she said, voice tired but precise. Did you know about Cole's hiring before it was announced? No, I said. Why? Because the paperwork says he started 3 months ago, she replied. But building access shows his first day was 2 weeks back. His salary is higher than yours. She paused, as if apologizing for facts. I've been reviewing change logs. Someone added a forwarding rule to mirror your client emails into Victor's inbox. It's been running for 6 weeks. I sat down without meaning to. Steam eased off my mug. Forwarding, I repeated, not surprised, only newly instructed. There's more, Patricia said. I found drafts and calendars for calls with a consulting firm in Berlin, Helmreich Partners. Victor's been negotiating a transfer of Atheron's European client list. The preliminary agreement was signed 2 weeks ago. Full transfer scheduled next month. She exhaled. He's telling them you were unreliable, that we need professionalized ownership of relationships. BG. The dust of leave. It was a clean puzzle now. Parade me to Paris, empty my seat, stage a nephew, then sell the garden and call it landscaping. Ambition can be elegant on paper. In practice, it trips over the human parts. Thank you, I said. Document everything. And Patricia, be careful. I am, she said softly. For what it's worth, this wasn't the company I thought I worked for. After the call, I looked at my notebook, the column where I keep the small truths that outlive PowerPoints. In Europe, continuity is a currency. A German CFO does not accept a stranger simply because a contract says they must. A French COO trusts the person who remembers how her team speaks about risk when they're tired. You can export software. You cannot export faith without a carrier. Victor had priced the accounts, not the quiet hours that made them durable. He had counted revenue, not the pauses we'd honored in meetings so that the right person could find the words. He assumed that a signature could be handed over like a folder. He mistook possession for permission. I called Alistair. "We need to accelerate." "What kind of acceleration?" he asked, already moving sentences into place. I told him about Berlin, the backdating, the forwarding rules, the architecture of a plan that forgot its beams were people. He listened the way surgeons listen to symptoms that don't sound dramatic but indicate something important. "If he's selling," he said at last, "he's already abdicated stewardship. Discontent will be mobile. Clients will want options," I said. "They will choose continuity if given a lawful path." "Then we'll build the path," he answered. "Our counsel will be strict so your conscience can stay light. Make your list. Prioritize those who value you by name." When the call ended, I wrote until the page filled with cities. Munich, Lyon, Oslo, Ghent, Lille. Not trophies. Homes I'd been invited into. The plan wasn't revenge. It was restoration. Move relationships to where they would be held with both hands. Outside, Chicago's light leaned gray against the window. Inside, the next week arranged itself with quiet certainty. I flew to London on the Tuesday red-eye, that suspended corridor where time has no elbows and thoughts can spread out. Heathrow at dawn is a choreography of rolling suitcases and unslept faces. I moved through it with a list in my pocket and a steadiness I recognized from difficult negotiations. Solstice's offices looked across a narrow street to a line of plane trees that had learned patience from weather. Alistair's assistant placed tea where I could reach it. 2 contracts waited by the window. The language was careful, and it respected me back. Equity that actually lived on a schedule, autonomy that wasn't a euphemism for isolation, a title that described responsibility rather than appetite. Our lawyers spoke first, their sentences precise, boundaries drawn so I would never need to blur them. The non-compete, circled and annotated, remained what it had always been: local, not oceanic. When I signed, it didn't feel like a leap. It felt like weight being redistributed to the parts of me built to carry it. Alistair didn't offer a speech, only a brief nod that said, "Work begins where ceremony ends." "You have your runway," he said. "Take off in weather you trust." By Thursday morning, I began making calls as if I were opening doors in a familiar house. Klaus first. "I'm with Solstice now," I told him, "based in London, able to continue precisely where we left off." He was quiet for a beat. Then, "This is preferable. We value the way you move the work without moving the people." His legal team would prepare the transfer. Our counsel would meet them halfway and nowhere further. Marie answered on the second ring with that French directness that has always felt like a kindness. "Finally," she said, "send the documents. I want the same engineers, the same cadence, the same refusal to oversell. If you guarantee that, we move." I did not promise what I couldn't own. I promised what I could shepherd. We set dates. Fjord Farm asked for a meeting rather than a signature, which was right. We scheduled Oslo for the following week, in a glass room that listens better than most. Across emails and calls, I kept one rule: no pressure, only clarity. The transfers were client-led, rooted in consent and continuity. There were no back doors, no shortcuts, only the front entrance, unlocked and named. By Friday evening, 6 contracts had agreed in principle to move, representing $42 million of revenue threaded through the next several years. 3 more requested meetings soon. I wrote cities on a fresh page: Munich, Paris, Stavanger. Not conquest, cartography. Back in Chicago, Atheron still believed momentum favored the boldest narrator. Victor was finalizing something with Berlin, rehearsing figures in a mirror. Cole, newly alone on calls, discovered that confidence without context is just volume. I didn't gloat. I slept. London's rain fretted at the windows as week 1 closed. Amelia's voice traveled cleanly across the Atlantic when we spoke that night. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Aligned," I said. "Like the work and the place finally recognize each other." "This is not revenge," she added gently. "No," I said. "This is stewardship relocated." He happed a better cow. In the quiet afterward, I thought about contracts like bridges. They hold because engineers honor weight and wind, not because someone insists they should. We were rebuilding crossings where the river had always wanted them to be. Monday began with the sound of paper becoming a verdict. Termination notices traveled like measured weather, first from Christensen Global, then Hollowgate, then a Swiss retailer that rarely hurried but never hesitated once it decided. Each letter was calm, almost courteous. "Due to material changes in stewardship, we exercise our right to withdraw." The phrases were precise in the way bridges are precise. In Chicago, they landed like stones. Patricia texted midday, "Storm here." Berlin was asking how one acquires a portfolio that keeps untying itself. Their counsel wanted assurances no one could honestly give. By afternoon, a call from Fjord Farm's legal team in Oslo reached Victor, requesting documentation Atheron could not produce without me. The thing about continuity is that it leaves a trail of conversations, not just signatures. Victor had counted signatures. He had not kept the conversations. On Tuesday, Cole quit. The official note called it a pivot to entrepreneurship, but everyone recognized the shape of retreat. I pictured him at my old desk, voice pitched an octave higher in meetings where the air had grown thinner. I don't dislike him. He was miscast, and the play collapsed around him. By Wednesday, the Berlin buyer stepped back, polite as a banker closing a folder. They had been promised a map. They discovered each city had moved a few inches to the right. Victor tried a new tone on voicemail, part conciliatory, part historical revision. "Eric, we can still make this right. Tell your friends to pause the transfers. We'll revisit terms." He had not yet understood the thing I'd repeated to myself in London. This wasn't a raid. It was gravity. Relationships were rolling downhill toward the place that honored their shape. The board assembled on Thursday. Boards are slow until they aren't. Numbers cooled their affection for stories. Patricia, who had spent nights gathering proof instead of sleep, carried her tidy dossier. Change logs, email forwarding rules, backdated start dates, the Berlin timeline. Every page made one argument. This was not a sudden storm. It was a weather pattern managed toward collapse. She didn't embellish. She didn't need to. That night, Amelia and I ate late. Simple food. Words kept short to leave room for breath. "Justice is not a parade," we agreed. "It's a recalibration, the beam finding true again after someone leaned too hard in the wrong place." Friday morning, it became official. Patricia called first, then Alistair. The board had removed Victor as regional director. Losses where no one wanted to say the number out loud. I felt a small loosening in my chest. Not joy, not vengeance. Relief that the structure would stop hurting the people inside it. There were emails from former colleagues, some grateful, some cautious. One from a young analyst who had watched too much and could now breathe. I answered each with restraint. We are never as singular as our victories suggest, nor as alone as our defeats imply. That evening, I walked the Thames before the rain arrived, thinking about how quietly large things end. Bridges don't cheer when they hold. They just do the work. 6 months slid into place, the way a well-made drawer closes quietly, with a certainty that invites your hands to rest. London became an address, I said without hesitation. Mornings began with mist over plane trees and emails that resembled conversations rather than alarms. At solstice, the reports read like weather improving. 14 American clients welcomed. 2 offices opened, Boston first, then Seattle, each staffed by people who listened twice before speaking once. Fjord Farm grew from a contract into a partnership, spread across 5 countries, the kind of expansion that feels less like more and more like right. Alistair never made a ceremony of trust. He practiced it. We shared decisions like rowers share a boat, each stroke aligned, silence earning its keep. equity as promised, autonomy as described. When challenges arrived, they were named plainly and solved without blame. I noticed how quickly competence becomes culture when it's allowed to breathe. Amelia moved in spring. We traded our old Chicago apartment for a house in Hampstead, with windows that catch afternoon light and a small kitchen that refuses to be anything but intimate. We learned new rituals: market flowers on Saturdays, long walks up Parliament Hill on Sundays, a language of everyday care that made the big choices simpler. We talked about children without rushing the conversation, the way we now do most things. Some names still found me. Patricia joined us to steady European operations. Her diligence fit Solstice like a key. Now and then, a message from a former colleague reached my inbox, curious, cautious, grateful. I answered with the same rule I use for bridges: enough reinforcement, no excess weight. June returned Paris to its clay. Alistair sent tickets corporate suite this time, the court below a red square of memory. Nadal lifted the trophy again, the 14th, a statistic to others, a continuity to us. I watched the crowd rise and felt my own year stand up behind my ribs. A line from that earlier day resurfaced: pressure rewards those who breathe well. I had held my breath for too long at Atheron. Now, I exhaled and didn't need to count. I heard once that gratitude is a discipline, not an accident. I practiced it there in the suite toward the clients who chose continuity with their feet, toward the engineers whose quiet excellence made promises keepable, toward Amelia for believing in a life we hadn't yet seen, even, in a complicated way, toward Victor. His cruelty had been a door. I didn't thank him. Some letters are better unwritten. But I recognized the strange math: a dismissal that became an invitation, a humiliation that became a hinge. On the walk back through Paris, the air tasted like rain on coins. A city cleans its face. You learn your own. Sometimes the worst line in your phone becomes the first line of your next chapter. No triumphal trumpet, just steadiness, finely aligned with its work.